we're going to talk about something that's going to hurt you. But you need it, because for too long you've been living inside a story that was never yours, a story they fed you. They made you believe that what you feel is love, that the anxiety, the jealousy, the waiting by the phone, the constant fear of being left was some twisted proof of how deeply you care. They told you that losing yourself for someone else is noble, that love is supposed to burn, ache, and leave you breathless. But here's the truth. What you're calling love is often just unhealed attachment, a trauma bond, a habit of clinging to chaos because peace feels unfamiliar. And the worst part, you believed it. You believed that pain meant meaning, that silence meant strength, that emotional exhaustion was the price of connection. But your body knows better. Your soul knows better. And that's why, without warning, something inside you begins to detach. You stop trying. You stop explaining. You stop needing their attention to feel alive. That's not coldness. That's clarity. And that's where this conversation begins. You called it love, but really it was fear. Fear of being alone. Fear of being forgotten. Fear of starting over. You confused emotional chaos with passion, silence with strength, and inconsistency with intensity. The world romanticized the pain for you. It taught you that love must be fought for, endured, chased. That the more you suffer, the more it proves you're alive. So you stayed. You kept investing in people who didn't ask how you were really doing. You kept loving in places where your soul wasn't being met. You became fluent in hiding your needs, dressing up your wounds in smiles, and calling emotional starvation loyalty. But something inside you eventually breaks, not with noise, not with fire, but with stillness. You start to feel less. You stop reacting. The things that used to shake you no longer move you. You hear their voice, and it doesn't light you up like it used to. You begin to emotionally detach, and the strange thing is, no one notices. You still answer texts. You still show up, but your presence is hollow. Your energy pulled inward like the tide before a storm. You're still functioning, but not connecting. You're drifting quietly, slowly, invisibly. This is why emotionally detaching feels like disappearing. Because you are, in a way. You're withdrawing your spirit from a place it no longer feels safe in. You're unhooking your identity from someone else's validation. You're peeling yourself off a future you once imagined together. But none of it is obvious. There are no announcements, no slammed doors. You simply begin to vanish, one boundary at a time, one unspoken resentment at a time, one silent night at a time. And what's even more disorienting is that you might still care. You might still love them in a way. But the difference now is that you no longer betray yourself in the process. You no longer sacrifice your own peace to keep the connection alive. You start valuing your inner quiet more than their occasional attention. You start choosing distance over distortion. And when you begin to emotionally detach, you don't do it to hurt them. You do it to stop hurting yourself. No one talks about how disorienting it is to feel this way, to still be in the same relationship, the same room, the same conversation, but feel completely gone. Your body is there, your words still come out, but your spirit has quietly packed its things and started walking toward the door. You become a ghost in your own life. And it's not because you don't care. It's because you've cared for too long, in places that couldn't hold it. It's because you've been loyal to pain disguised as love. It's because your soul got tired of screaming through your smile. The detachment doesn't happen overnight. It builds slowly, like dust settling on furniture no one touches anymore. At first you deny it. You think you're just moody, or distant, or tired. But soon you realize this is different. You're not escaping, you're returning to yourself, to the parts of you that were buried under the weight of trying too hard, to the clarity that only silence can bring. You realize you're not cold for pulling away, you're healing. And healing doesn't always look graceful. Sometimes it looks like not texting back. Sometimes it looks like staring at a message and feeling absolutely nothing. Sometimes it looks like choosing not to explain yourself, because you finally understand that your peace doesn't need to be justified. Emotional detachment is rarely loud. It's the art of quiet exits, the kind of goodbye that happens without words, without doors closing, without anyone else even noticing you're already gone. The hardest part isn't detaching, it's pretending you haven't. It's waking up every day and performing a version of you that still fits the space you're outgrowing. It's smiling when your soul is miles away. It's watching yourself show up for conversations that no longer feel real. And deep down, a part of you keeps hoping they'll notice, that they'll see the difference, that they'll feel what you no longer say. But often they don't, because they were never listening in the first place. And that's when it finally hits you. You were holding the entire relationship in place. Your effort, your care, your emotional labor. You were the glue. And when you stop showing up in that way, things don't fall apart dramatically. They just quietly reveal what was always true. You were the only one fighting for it. So you stop. You stop chasing, stop proving, stop rescuing. You let things be what they are. You start walking away emotionally long before you ever leave physically. And when you do leave, it won't be out of anger or revenge. It'll be out of acceptance. A deep knowing that you no longer belong where you have to beg to be felt. Emotional detachment is a return to your own gravity. A soft rebellion against the part of you that thought you had to shrink to be loved. It's not about becoming numb. It's about becoming whole again. It's about protecting the parts of you that were scattered in pursuit of someone else's attention. You don't lose your heart in the process. You finally hold it for yourself. This is why it feels like disappearing. Because who you were in that connection no longer exists. Because your spirit is no longer available for roles that require your abandonment. Because you've stopped showing up in places that feed off your silence. And yet this kind of disappearance isn't emptiness. It's space. Sacred, quiet, unfamiliar space, where something new can finally grow. Not from desperation, not from fear, but from truth, from wholeness, from you. You start noticing the small freedoms first. The way your body relaxes when you no longer have to perform. The way your breath deepens when you're not anxiously waiting for a reply. The sudden unfamiliar calm of not needing to be understood. It's strange, at first, to feel peace where there used to be noise. To feel stillness where you used to run in circles, chasing approval, validation, connection. For so long, you were addicted to the chaos. Now you're learning how to exist without it. And it feels almost wrong, because pain had become your language. You spoke fluently in disappointment, miscommunication, unspoken expectations. You knew how to survive in emotional turbulence, but you were never taught how to feel safe in quiet. So when that quiet comes, after detachment, it doesn't always feel like relief. Sometimes it feels like loneliness, like floating in space, with no one to anchor you. But don't mistake that feeling for regression. That emptiness isn't a void, it's a clearing. Because in that clearing, something begins to return. You start hearing your own thoughts again. You begin remembering what you used to enjoy, before you shaped yourself around someone else. Music sounds different. Your own company no longer feels like punishment. You begin to rebuild trust with yourself, not all at once, but gently. You stop asking others for permission to feel what you feel. You stop needing someone else's version of you to feel real. And somewhere in that quiet, the grief hits you. Not just grief for the person, or the relationship, but for the version of you who kept trying, who stayed too long, who overgave, over-apologized, overcompensated. You grieve the emotional labor you performed in silence, the dignity you sacrificed. The red flags you painted white, because hope kept whispering, maybe it'll change. You grieve how much of yourself you abandoned for the possibility of being chosen. But grief is not the enemy, it's proof you're waking up. Because only when you truly detach, do you finally feel the weight of all you've carried. And instead of running from that weight, this time, you sit with it. You let it move through you. You don't try to fix it or rush it or numb it. You let it teach you. And in doing so, you begin to reclaim something you didn't even realize you'd lost: your sense of self. You realize you don't have to disappear to be loved. You don't have to constantly prove that you're worthy of attention, presence, care. You were always worthy, even when they couldn't see it. Even when they only loved the version of you that made them comfortable. Even when they mistook your emotional availability for weakness. You were never too much. You were never asking for too much. You were just asking the wrong people. This is what emotional detachment makes space for. Not bitterness, but clarity. Not walls, but boundaries. You learn the difference between protecting yourself and punishing others. You stop shrinking for love. You stop giving people the parts of you they haven't earned. You realize that silence isn't always absence. Sometimes it's alignment. And alignment feels like this: peace, even when no one texts back; self-respect, even when they don't apologize; trust, even when there's no guarantee. You become less reactive and more reflective, less desperate and more discerning. You no longer beg to stay in rooms your spirit has already left. You no longer chase love in places where your value is questioned. You choose presence over performance, stillness over drama, depth over distraction. You start building a new relationship with yourself, one built on honesty, patience, and softness. You speak to yourself kindly. You honor your limits. You no longer call rest laziness or boundaries selfish. You realize that healing isn't a straight line, it's a spiral. And sometimes you'll return to the same lesson with deeper understanding. Sometimes you'll still miss them. Sometimes you'll wonder if it was all your fault. But then you'll remember the truth, the one your body tried to whisper to you all along. You can't connect where you're not safe. You can't grow where you're not seen. And you can't thrive in a space that feeds on your silence. So you keep walking. Maybe slowly, maybe shakily, but forward. You stop waiting to be rescued and start learning how to rescue yourself. You stop hoping they'll come back changed, and start becoming the version of you who no longer needs them to. You stop measuring your worth by how much pain you can endure for love. And instead you ask better questions. Not do they still love me, but do I feel safe with them? Not why did they leave, but why was I the one always holding things together? Not what's wrong with me, but what did I learn about myself in loving them? Because emotional detachment isn't the end of love. It's the beginning of self-love. It's what happens when you stop abandoning yourself to stay connected to someone who has long stopped reaching for you. It's when you return to your center. When you finally stop disappearing, not from them, but from yourself. One day you wake up and realize the ache is no longer the first thing you feel. There's a strange quiet where the longing used to live, not because you've forgotten, but because you've forgiven. Not them, yourself. You forgive yourself for staying, for hoping, for making excuses, for believing potential was a promise. You no longer carry the weight of the story alone. You set it down, and you feel lighter, not because someone came to save you, but because you stopped abandoning yourself to be saved. And that's when the world starts to feel different. You begin to notice the sky again. Music finds its way into your chest like it used to. You walk slower, you listen more. You're no longer in survival mode. You're alive, fully, finally. The moments you used to race through, breakfast, sunlight on your skin, a quiet evening alone, become sacred. You stop measuring life by someone else's presence. You stop needing a witness to validate your experience. You start choosing yourself without guilt and without announcement. It feels unfamiliar at first, this peace. It doesn't rush you. It doesn't beg for attention. It waits patiently while you remember who you were before the noise. And you do remember. In small ways. You laugh from your belly. You say no and mean it. You notice the way your shoulders lower when you're with people who don't require you to shrink. You become selective, not out of fear, but out of reverence for your own energy. You don't seek intensity anymore. You seek consistency. You don't crave fireworks. You crave foundation. You realize love isn't supposed to be dizzying. It's supposed to feel like coming home. You start seeing through the mirage of emotional highs and lows, recognizing the patterns that once drew you in. You stop being fascinated by people who confuse you, and you start being drawn to people who calm you, who meet you, who see you, not as someone to fix or figure out, but as someone to simply be with. And you begin to see yourself differently too. Not as broken, not as too much, not as hard to love, but as human, as whole. You see the cracks not as proof of failure, but as the places where light got in. You start walking through the world with a quieter kind of confidence, not loud, not performative, just steady. You know what you bring. You know what you're worth. And more importantly, you know what you will no longer tolerate. People around you might notice the shift. Some will be drawn to your light. Others will miss the version of you that overextended, over-apologized, over-committed. But you won't go back. Not because you're bitter, but because you've changed. Growth has made your peace non-negotiable. You no longer explain your healing to people committed to misunderstanding it. And one day, not suddenly, but softly, you find yourself ready to open again. Not from emptiness, not from fear of being alone, but from fullness. From a quiet readiness to share your heart, not hand it over. You don't fall in love to be saved, to be seen, or to feel worthy. You love because you already are. You're not afraid of losing them, because you're no longer lost in them. And if they leave, you don't collapse. You return to yourself, because now you know the way back. You've been there before, and this time, you're not afraid of your own company. You've built something solid inside, something no one else can give or take away, and that becomes your home. Not a person, not a place, a state of being, a self that no longer needs to disappear to be loved. You learn how to live open-hearted and guarded by wisdom. You don't harden, you refine. You don't close off, you discern. And through that discernment, you find new connections. People who don't drain you, who don't question your worth, who don't require your silence to stay close. You attract what reflects your new frequency, depth, presence, truth. Not because you chased it, but because you became it. You begin to dream again, but this time, the dreams include you, not just what you can be for others, but what you can become for yourself. And what you can share, not to prove anything, but simply because it overflows. Your time, your care, your love, no longer currency for survival, but a gift freely given from wholeness. You no longer search for distractions to escape yourself. You're not afraid of quiet rooms, empty weekends, or being alone with your own thoughts. In fact, you welcome them. The stillness that once scared you now feels like a friend. A space where you hear yourself clearly. A space where your truth doesn't get drowned out by noise. There's no longer a rush to fill the silence. You don't need constant connection to feel alive. You're not refreshing your phone, rereading old conversations, or wondering why they haven't replied. You've stopped assigning your worth to someone else's attention span. You've reclaimed the space in your own mind, the real estate in your heart. That's when you begin to notice the difference between being alone and feeling lonely. You may still feel lonely sometimes, everyone does, but it's no longer unbearable. It doesn't define you. It passes through like weather. And instead of reaching for temporary relief, you let the wave come and go. You learn to be with yourself in all your seasons, in joy, in sorrow, in longing, in peace. And life meets you there, not perfectly, not all at once, but in honest, unexpected ways. You meet people who mirror the calm you've built inside, conversations that don't leave you drained, friendships that aren't based on mutual pain, but mutual presence. A slow, organic unfolding of connection, not born from need, but from resonance. You stop looking for someone to complete you, because you no longer feel incomplete. You don't fall for people who make you anxious. You don't ignore red flags, because you believe love will fix them. You no longer mistake familiarity for safety. You've learned that real safety feels like breathing, steady, consistent, never rushed. You know the difference now. And when love finds you again, if it does, you won't shrink to fit into it. You won't edit yourself to be more palatable, more convenient, more pleasing. You won't confuse being chosen with being valued. You'll walk into love as a whole person, not a puzzle missing pieces. You'll love without losing yourself. You'll give without disappearing. You'll stay open without making yourself small. But even if love doesn't arrive right away, you won't panic. You won't see your life as waiting. You won't treat singlehood as a problem to solve. You'll understand that your life is happening right now, not in some future version where someone finally sees you. You'll see yourself now, and that's enough. You begin to show up for life differently, slower, deeper. You no longer seek to impress, you seek to connect. You're no longer driven by validation, you're moved by meaning. The things that once consumed you, how you looked, how others saw you, what they thought when you said nothing, no longer hold the same weight. You've shifted. Your axis has changed. You've come home to something solid within you. And now you build from there. Your definition of love expands. It's no longer something to chase. It's something to live. You find it in the way you care for your space, the way you move through your day with intention, the way you speak to yourself when no one's listening. Love becomes something you embody, not just something you seek. And your relationship with the past changes too. You no longer flinch when you think of them. You no longer replay what you could have done differently. You stop rewriting the story. You make peace with the truth. You did what you could with what you knew, and now you know more. Now you choose differently, not out of fear, but out of awareness. You don't hold resentment, you hold wisdom. You don't wish them pain, you wish yourself peace. You understand now that some endings aren't failures, they're corrections, course changes, exit points, invitations to return to yourself. And that emotional detachment was never about punishing them. It was about saving you. Because when you emotionally detach, you reclaim something sacred, your sovereignty, your right to choose peace over chaos, your right to walk away from what confuses your nervous system, your right to protect your energy without apology. And when you live from that place, that grounded, aware, deeply self-connected place, everything changes. You stop trying to earn rest. You stop apologizing for softness. You stop treating boundaries as walls, and start seeing them as doors, not to keep others out, but to keep yourself in. And what once felt like disappearing, now feels like arriving. You haven't vanished. You've simply returned to where you always belonged. Inside your own life, in your own body, at peace with your own company. You're no longer a satellite orbiting around someone else's gravity. You're your own center now, and from that center you rise, not louder, but clearer, not harder, but more whole. You no longer carry yourself like someone who's trying to be chosen. You carry yourself like someone who remembers they already belong. You no longer beg for space in someone else's world. You build your own, quietly, tenderly, and with the kind of care you used to give away too easily. And in that world you speak more gently, not because you've been silenced, but because your voice no longer trembles. You take up space, not to prove anything, but because you've stopped shrinking. You walk slower, not because you're lost, but because you're finally present. Your life no longer rushes past you. You're in it now, all the way in. You begin to treat your inner world with reverence. You tend to your emotions without judgment. You create rituals around your peace, not because you're trying to heal something broken, but because you're honoring something sacred. You light candles not to feel better, but because you deserve beauty. You move your body not to be seen, but because it feels good to inhabit it. You write, breathe, rest, not for productivity, but for presence. And the way you connect changes too. You don't perform your personality anymore. You don't scan for approval in people's faces. You don't shapeshift in conversation. You let yourself be fully seen, even when you're quiet, even when you're unsure, because you've made peace with the parts of you that were once hidden, and now there's nothing to prove. There's just you, whole, present, real. You might still feel things deeply. That hasn't changed. The difference now is that you no longer abandon yourself when the feelings come. You don't run from discomfort. You hold it. You meet it like an old friend. You say, I see you. I've been here before. And I'm not afraid anymore. And there's power in that. Quiet power. The kind that doesn't need an audience. The kind that comes from surviving yourself, from walking through fire and learning how to be the water, from breaking apart and choosing to rebuild slowly, intentionally, with your own hands. That's what emotionally detaching gave you. Not numbness, not distance, but the space to remember who you are when no one is watching. The strength to choose yourself over and over again. Not as a last resort, but as your first instinct. And now when you offer your heart, you do it from a grounded place, a steady place, a place that knows how to hold love without losing grip on your own soul. You give from overflow, not emptiness. You share because you want to, not because you're afraid of being forgotten. Maybe the world won't notice your transformation. Maybe no one will applaud it. Maybe the people who once drained you will still think you were the problem. That's okay. You didn't do this for them. You didn't come home to yourself to be congratulated. You came back because you were tired of being lost in places that couldn't see you. And now here you are, rooted, whole, unapologetically present, not perfect, but real, not always certain, but always returning to yourself. You're no longer disappearing to keep others close. You're no longer giving so much that you vanish in the process. You've learned to stay with yourself through everything. And in that staying, you've become someone you can finally trust. So when they ask what happened, why you seem different, why you're quieter now, why you stopped showing up in the same way, you'll smile. Not out of bitterness, not out of pride, but out of peace. The kind of peace that comes when you stop running from yourself and start coming home. You're not disappearing, you're becoming. And this time you won't lose yourself in the process. You might not even realize how much you've changed. You still laugh, still take care of others, still show up, but something in your eyes has softened, or maybe hardened, just a little. Something inside you is different now, and you feel it when you're sitting at a table full of people, smiling, but you're not performing anymore. You're not scanning the room for someone to understand what you're not saying. You're just there, quiet, settled, whole. And maybe sometimes you miss who you used to be. The softness, the eagerness, the way your heart used to leap so easily toward anyone who showed you a little attention. You wonder where that version of you went. But if you're honest, that version was always a little scared, a little unsure, a little desperate for someone to see your worth, so you wouldn't have to keep proving it. You don't live like that anymore. Not because you stopped feeling, but because you started protecting what you feel. You've learned how much your energy costs, and you no longer spend it recklessly. You've learned that not everyone who wants access to you deserves it. That love isn't proved through suffering, and silence isn't strength when it's swallowing your truth. Maybe you've had moments, late at night, in the car, folding laundry, where it all crashes in on you. The memories, the old hopes, the version of your life you were building in your head with someone who didn't show up, and you let yourself cry. Or maybe you don't. Maybe the tears don't come anymore. And that scares you. Maybe you wonder if you've gone numb. But it's not numbness, it's wisdom. It's your body finally letting go of something it held on to for too long. You still love deeply. That never left you. But now, that love includes you. You don't love to fix. You don't love to prove. You love because it flows through you. And if it doesn't come back with the same integrity, you let it go. That's not cold. That's clarity. And maybe someone new enters your life now. They ask what you've been through. You don't give them all the details, but you tell them enough. You speak without bitterness. You don't name names. You just say, I've learned a lot about what love isn't. And they look at you with eyes that aren't trying to fix you or figure you out, but just see you. And for a second you want to pull away. Not because they've done anything wrong, but because old wounds get nervous around new peace. But you stay, because something in you knows that you're ready, not to fall but to stand beside someone without losing your balance. And maybe you don't meet that person yet. Maybe the next chapter is still just you, your routines, your boundaries, your quiet joy. And that's okay, because now you understand that solitude isn't emptiness, It's alignment. It's space for you to keep unfolding, unlearning, becoming. It's space where you get to choose who enters, who stays, who reflects the peace you've worked so hard to build. You've made a home out of yourself now, and maybe for the first time in a long time, or ever, you feel safe there. And now when the world gets loud again, when the past tries to call you back, you won't answer the same way, because you've changed, quietly, powerfully, permanently. You've returned to yourself, and in that return you've found what they never gave you: peace, clarity, and a love that doesn't cost your soul. You are no longer disappearing. You're here, fully, finally. And this time you're not leaving.